So I'd asked the question, what is the function of this little gear? And the answer is backlash. So when I first got this gearbox, before I did any of the design work on the system, I played around to see what its backlash was like. So I grabbed a pliers and started torquing on the output and input shaft and seeing how it worked. And at first, the backlash was amazing. In a similar test setup, I was getting almost no perceptible motion, and there was a lot of friction. So I said, that's great. That's going to help with damping in the control system, because I don't care about efficiency with this thing. I care about control. And so I thought, great, high friction, low backlash, that's wonderful. But after only a couple hours of use, the backlash got worse as the gears wore in and bearings settled into place. Probably the bearings on the end of the worm gear in here got pushed outwards a little bit. So that's another option, might be adding some preload to or some springs to the worm gear inside of there. I haven't opened it up to check if that's a good solution. But I am considering two solutions. And one of them is going to be a motor with a gear on here that applies a constant torque. Other ideas have been to use some springs, and because the whole idea here is there's some slop in the gear train, and oops, my cat needs it. There's some slop in the gear train, and you want to bias it towards one side. So a simple way to do that is just add mass here. So if you add mass, you'll constantly be pushing the gear train down in one direction, and you don't have a backlash problem. But if you go up here, the resultant force vector from gravity makes the amount of torque being applied to mitigate backlash quite diminished at these angles. So you're going to have wiggle when you're pointing straight up. So the next simplest thing you could do would be to make some kind of spiral, I don't know even what you would call it, some kind of spiral contraption on here, and to dangle a weight off of it. And then you would always have the same torque. That's a little silly. So you would replace that weight with a spring. And that's essentially what I'll end up doing, is I will take this device and mount it onto that output shaft, and then wrap a spring around it and connect the spring to the housing here. And I think that has a good shot at success. I think this motor solution has a good shot at success. I like the motor solution because you could turn it on and off if you don't need it. Also, springs wear out. I found the springs are quite a bit more expensive than the motor solution, especially when you get down to the x-axis, where you would want to have the same tension in the spring without exceeding its rating. You also don't get linear force in a spring. As it coils and uncoils, you'll get more or less torque depending on where you are. So there's a lot of trade-offs to consider, and this is really my favorite part of engineering, is understanding the trade-offs. Imagine it's just like playing a game of chess. It's not about intelligence, it's about seeing all the possibilities and then choosing the best possibility, examining if it's going to work or not, moving forward as far and as fast as you can, and checking which solutions work and don't work. So it's been fascinating over my career to see this play out in a professional world. This choice of, would you use a motor or a spring, can have so many effects. You think about our culture now. Most of the decisions made in engineering are very petty. Most of them are made by people trying to maximize their importance in an organization because they have kids to put through college and they're worried about their career. Now with a lot of foreigners in our culture, the motivations are to get their family to the U.S., to get a green card, to import their friends. And those motivations by people designing things have significant impacts on our culture, on our supply chain we've seen. And so I want you to know my motivations are to preserve Western civilization. Because if you read history, you know that the concept of freedom could become like a hieroglyph, or those, really precisely cut stones, where people look back at them, they don't know how it was built. They're impressed by it, but they don't have the energy to do it. Nobody would go carve and move those stones into place or do anything like that these days. And that's what could happen with freedom and our way of life. It could be something that's just read about in the history books. It's not about ourselves, about individuals. It's about the entire concept of people living free lives, owning land, owning anything. Our enemies want us locked up in concentration camps. The name of my channel, Deplorable Security Devices, comes from the great Hillary Clinton calling some of the greatest people who've ever lived irredeemable deplorables. So my motivation, another one, is infamy, to become a bit well known for building these sentry guns. And so that one day she reads the news and sees that there are tens of thousands of these turrets being built every month by you, people watching, myself, and that we are going to do everything we can to preserve our culture, to preserve our way of life. And to me, it's beautiful that these little decisions will affect that. Supply chain, effectiveness, all matter. And we will only get a successful design if our motivations are pure and in alignment with each other. Our culture is special. The people who invented it are special. We're unique in history. It should be preserved. This concept of not owning anything, no cultural identity, is poison. So, yeah, that's the answer to the trivia. Thank you guys for watching. It's always fun hearing the comments. And I guess that's about all I have for now. I'll share some results in a few days here as I get some parts in and can test out the 2 different Backlash systems. Until then, plans for this thing are probably on hold until I figure out this Backlash problem. The good thing is there are a lot of solutions to this, and it's just a matter of trying out different ones. I have a list of probably 40 or 50 different possible solutions to this, and I chose the best 2 that I could think of, and we will see what happens.